I'd like to welcome you all to the Preserving Foods Safely Drying Foods presentation. My name is Shelly Barnes, and I'm the Family Consumer Sciences Extension Agent in Wilson County, and I would like to ask my colleague to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary Draper and I'm the Family and Consumer Science Extension Agent in Smith County, and I'm here to help Shelly facilitate some of those questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate having you today with me as always. So drying is one of the oldest, if not the oldest form of preserving food. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And there are going to be some advantages of drying that we'll discuss. Like other methods of preserving food, drying has both advantages and disadvantages. Drying is fairly simple, and foods take up less storage space and are easy to transport. Shelf life of dried foods is fairly long depending on the product and the storage temperature. Drying foods require few supplies and equipment, and a few added ingredients, and they can be limited in quantity, such as added sugar. So it doesn't take a lot of ingredients besides the product itself. Now, the disadvantages of drying are that drying takes time and food has to be checked throughout the process. Trays need to be shifted and food should be stirred or rearranged at specific time intervals, so about every 30 minutes. Once the process starts, there should be no interruption, since this provides the opportunity for mold growth and for spoilage. And interruptions being, like if the power goes out, or maybe you want to, I've seen some questions, maybe you want to go to bed and you don't want to leave it running, that would be considered interruptions. We don't need to do that. Of course, we can't really avoid the power going out, so we kind of need to start over. And there will be some nutritional losses that take place during pre-treatment and processing. It can be expensive depending on the method and equipment used. You need some experience because it can be difficult to determine when the food is dry. So definitely if you haven't dried food before, you have to know that sometimes it just takes experience and some trial and error probably as well. So drying is not suitable for all foods. Milk products, and eggs are not recommended for home drying because of the high risk of foodborne illness. Commercially dried milk and egg products are processed rapidly at temperatures high enough to prevent bacterial contamination, which we are not able to duplicate with home dryers. So we want to avoid trying to dry those products. Many fruits and vegetables are better if they're frozen or canned, which we've talked about in this series before. And if you missed that, you can go back to our YouTube channel and look at those sessions. Avocados are not recommended because of their high fat content. Seeds in fruit make them undesirable for drying, but are fine for fruit leathers. And I know, this is really just more of a preference type thing with the berries with seeds. I know lots of people that do dry strawberries for strawberry chips, which is a nutritional snack for children and adults alike. Citrus fruits are too juicy and the pulp does not have a firm enough texture. Crab apples are too small and tart, but you can combine them with other fruit for leather. Guavas have flesh that is full of seeds, but can be combined with other fruit for leather. Olives have a high oil content and a bitter flavor when dried. Pomegranates have too many seeds in the pulp, and quince are hard and strongly acidic, but can be combined with other fruit for leather. So if we look at these examples, there are some characteristics of some foods that make them unsuitable for drying. Those characteristics are water content, fat content, seed content, and flavor. There are also some unsuitable vegetables for drying. And if any of you have the So Easy to Preserve book, these list of vegetables that are suitable for drying are outlined there, and then as well as fruits. And we'll also give you some resources at the end of this presentation so that you can figure out all of the fruits and vegetables that you might like to dry in the future. Water content may be too high for these unsuitable vegetables, which are broccoli, lettuce, radishes, and winter squash. They may have surfaces or layers that are difficult to dry. The flavor may be undesirable, or you may end up with a product of poor quality. Here are some more vegetables that dry poorly: leafy greens, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, celery, and cucumbers. Leafy greens dry poorly as well as these other items, so we definitely want to avoid that and have a different method for preserving those. So let's talk about the principles of drying. Most foods have enough water to support activity of enzymes, chemical reactions, and the growth of microorganisms during harvest and storage. However, water activity can produce undesirable changes in food during storage. Drying involves the removal and binding of moisture so that it is not available to enzymes or microorganisms. Any method that removes water from food or reduces the amount of available moisture is a form of drying. For example, salting meat or seafood, which draws moisture from the flesh, is a form of drying. Now, in addition to the removal of water, pretreatment of most food is necessary to help stop enzyme activity, to minimize oxidation reactions, and to decrease the microbial population on the surface of the food. Although pretreatment can decrease microbial population on the surface of the food, pretreatment primarily helps maintain food quality. It helps it retain maximum nutritional value, flavor, color, and cooking qualities. Now, the method you choose to dry foods depends on several factors, including the final quality desired, your time that you have available, the money you have to invest, and of course, our weather conditions, which are pretty unpredictable here in Tennessee. Factors that need to be controlled is a major consideration when choosing a method. So let's think about the factors that are important to control when drying food. Temperature is important and will vary with the food and the method used, but 140 degrees Fahrenheit is usually maintained in an oven or a dehydrator. Also, air circulation is necessary to carry off the moisture. Control of temperature and air circulation are critical because they affect relative humidity and drying time as well as a rate of drying. If the rate of drying is too slow, for example, the temperature is low and the humidity is high, microorganisms could grow during the drying process. By contrast, a fast rate of drying that causes rapid evaporation of moisture from the surface of food can result in case hardening. Case hardening refers to development of a hard shell that forms on the surface of the food and traps moisture in the center of the food, which does allow for spoilage to occur. So let's talk a little bit about sun drying. Sun drying is also called open air drying. Now, sun drying is a good choice when the climate is hot and dry for several consecutive days with temperatures above 85 degrees Fahrenheit and humidity is below 60 degrees and if air pollution is low. And so many of you are probably thinking, we probably don't have that many days in a row here in Tennessee that would fit that requirement. And you would probably be right. Also, sun drying is a good choice when you want to spend less money or when you have large quantities. It's not a good choice when temperatures are too low and humidity is too high when air is polluted. The quality and nutritional value are usually lower than for food dried under more controlled conditions. Conditions may also be unsanitary. So what foods can we sun dry? Usually foods with high sugar and acid content are those suitable for sun drying. This is because mold growth and spoilage can begin during the long drying period. High acid and sugar content helps preserve during the drying period, thus inhibiting growth of mold and other spoilage organisms to some degree. Fruits are a good choice for sun drying. Vegetables, with the exception of legumes dried on the vine, should not be sun dried. Sun drying herbs and spices is also not recommended because there's a high loss of aromatics, flavor compounds, and color. Meat and fish also should not be sun dried because of the safety problems associated with the low temperature and the long drying time. Another method of drying is solar drying. Solar drying is a modification of sun drying in which the sun's rays are collected inside a specially designed unit with adequate ventilation for removal of moist air. The temperature is usually 20 to 30 degrees higher than in open sunlight. This higher temperature will decrease the drying time. However, exposure to direct sunlight should be controlled to prevent case hardening. Solar drying can be faster and more sanitary than sun drying depending on how you construct your dryer. However, the initial cost and time to build the dryer could be high. You still have a problem with the weather being in control. In Tennessee, we really need at least 2 days of high temperatures and low humidity. And there is usually not a way to really control the temperature, which results in a lower quality product. The actual amount of food you can dry is also limited by the size of your dryer, unlike sun drying. Now, you can dry the same foods, fruit and legumes in the solar dryer as in sun drying. So let's talk about vine drying. When the weather permits, you can partially dry legumes on vines. If the weather is rainy, pods and seeds can mold. Legumes such as navy, kidney, butter, Great Northern, lima, lentils, and soybeans can be vine dried. Leave your bean pods on the vine in the garden until the beans inside rattle. When the vines and pods are dry and shriveled, pick the beans and shell them. No pretreatment is necessary. If beans are still moist, the drying process is not complete and the beans will mold if not more thoroughly dried. If needed, drying can be completed in the sun, oven, or a dehydrator. Another method is room drying. Room drying is a very old method that was used extensively in pioneer days. Some of y'all have probably heard of leather breeches. Green beans were strung on a thread and allowed to dry and were referred to as leather breeches. Today, it is very difficult to dry food in rooms because of our air conditioning. The room needs to be warm, no less than 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and have enough air circulation. Low humidity is also desirable. If conditions are not just right, mold can grow before the food dries out completely. Besides a room, foods can be dried in a dust-free attic if it is warm, dry, and well ventilated, or they could be dried in a car or a camper if the windows are slightly opened and air circulation allows moisture to be removed. Now, what can we dry in a room? Herbs, nuts and shell, partially dried foods that are high in acid and sugar, and red chili peppers, partially dried, can be dried indoors. Sometimes fruits partially dried in the sun can be finished indoors if the temperature and the air circulation is right. Another way to dry food is to use your oven. Fruits, fruit leathers, vegetables, meats, fish, and cereals can be dried in the oven. Drying herbs and spices in the oven is not recommended because they lose aromatics, flavor compounds, and flavor. Foods with a high moisture content are difficult to dry in the oven. With this method, there is little investment in equipment if we already own the oven. It doesn't depend on weather conditions, and most food can be dried in the oven. Now, on the other hand, your energy costs can be high. It takes about twice as long as a dehydrator. Food also must be rotated at regular intervals. Compared to a dehydrator, foods tend to be darker and more brittle with less flavor. It also ties your oven up for long periods of time, so you wouldn't be able to bake while you're drying. Using a fan with your oven can speed up the process because it can help moisture evaporate. There's the fan. So let's talk about dehydrators. A dehydrator is a self-contained unit with a heat source and ventilation system used to dry foods indoors. They can be purchased, made at home, and vary in price and efficiency. Any food that is safe to dry that retains its high quality can be dried in a dehydrator. So let's think about what would be some advantages using a dehydrator to dry foods. A good quality product can be in or near the kitchen, does not tie up any other equipment, it doesn't depend on weather, it's sanitary, and it takes minimal time to dry. The disadvantages could be it can be expensive to purchase a dehydrator. The quantity of food that is dried depends on the size of the dehydrator or the number of trays that your dehydrator has. There are two basic designs for dehydrators. One has horizontal airflow and the other has a vertical airflow. The horizontal airflow, I think those are switched. Anyway, the horizontal would be on the bottom and the vertical would be on the top. And in the units with the horizontal flow, which is the one on the bottom, sorry about that, the heating element and fan are located on the side of the unit. So in this one here, the heating and the fan elements are located at the back of the unit. And so that would make the air flow horizontally out the machine. The major advantages of horizontal flow are it reduces flavor mixtures, so several different foods can be dried at one time. All trays receive equal heat penetration, and juices or liquids do not drip down into the heating element. Now, vertical airflow dehydrators, which would be this one on the top, even though our text says something different, this is a vertical airflow dehydrator. They have the heating element and fan located at the base. So this white part would be where your motor and your fan is located. Then the air would be circulated up through the dehydrator. If different foods are dried, the flavors can mix. Liquids also can drip into the heating element. Another thing, even though you probably want to rotate these trays on the horizontal airflow dehydrator, you don't have to, you just need to kind of turn them around. You don't have to rotate them with one another. On the vertical airflow dehydrator, you do want to change the position of the trays so that at some point during the dehydration process, each tray has equal time closest to the fan. Now, I know that my mom has a dehydrator like this, which is the vertical, the round one, and then I have a dehydrator like this one on the bottom, the horizontal, and I really like the horizontal airflow the best. It works better for me. You don't want to place drying racks over floor registers leading from the furnace. Too much dust can get into the food and fumes from combustion can be absorbed by the food. With the exception of herbs, microwaves should not be used for drying because they cook rather than dry the food. So now we're going to talk about pretreatment of fruit. A product of higher quality will result in fruits if fruits are pre-treated before drying. Pre-treatments, which are optional for fruits, can include quick blanching to remove or crack the skins. The skin helps maintain freshness and holds in that juice, seeds, flesh, and flavor. But you have to perforate or pierce the skin in order to let moisture escape and dry the fruit. Otherwise, the fruit will begin to ferment or spoil before it has a chance to dry. Usually, the fruit is halved, sliced, or checked to allow the release of moisture. So what is checking? To check a fruit, dip it in boiling water for 30 seconds to a few minutes or long enough to crack the skin. Quick cooling of the fruit in ice water will prevent further cooking. So blueberries, for example, you would just want to make a little prick in those. You can do that with a toothpick or a knife, something like that. And then that will help release the moisture from the inside to let those blueberries dry out. Grapes would be the same way. Once the fruit's flesh is exposed, enzymatic and oxidative changes begin that will alter the color, the flavor, and the nutrient retention. To prevent these changes from occurring as you work with the fruit, especially the enzymatic browning of the fruits with light-colored flesh, most fruits need a temporary pre-treatment. Simply place the fruit in one of the following solutions. So you could use 1 teaspoon of ascorbic acid per gallon of water or 1/4 of a teaspoon of sodium bisulfite per quart of water. As the fruit sits in the solution, its moisture content will increase, which means it takes longer to dry. Do not keep the fruit in the solution for more than 1 hour. Changes in nutrient retention, flavor, and color will continue during storage if long-term treatment is not done. Sulfur dioxide is the most effective long-term pretreatment for fruits. However, there are safety concerns as sulfites have been found to cause asthmatic reactions for some people with asthma. Sublime sulfur is burned in a closed container and absorbed by the fruit. This is done outdoors. The sulfur retards spoilage and prevents darkening of the fruit. It also reduces the loss of vitamins A and C. Soaking fruit in sodium bisulfite is similar to sulfuring, but not as effective. So there are a couple of ways to blanch to pre-treat fruit. There is what's called a syrup blanching, which involves blanching fruit in a heavy syrup. It makes the fruit almost like candy. It changes the texture and the natural flavor of fruit. There is also some destruction of vitamin A and C due to the heat. The fruit can stick to drying trays and can scorch in the later stages of drying. When done outside, it also attracts more insects than other methods, so we probably don't want to do that. But it does produce a very tasty product when we're using syrup blanching. Another method is to steam blanch. It helps retain color and slows oxidation, but is one of the least effective ways to pre-treat fruit for drying. With this method, you lose some natural flavor and vitamin A and C. The fruit is placed in a steamer pan, a wire basket, or vegetable blancher, not more than 2 inches deep, and placed over boiling water. There are also some additional treatments for fruit that is stored for short periods of time. You can use the ascorbic acid solution, an ascorbic acid mixture, which is a mixture of ascorbic acid and sugar, and is sold in stores for use with fresh fruit or canning and freezing. A fruit juice dip, or a honey dip. Now I've tried all of those, and it just depends on what flavor you're looking for. Of course, the honey dip is going to produce a much sweeter flavor, as well as the fruit juice, just depending on if it's using if you're trying to dry apples, you use apple juice. Just depends on what fruit juice you use. But those are some ideas to pre-treat your fruit. So let's talk now about the pre-treatment of vegetables. A pre-drying treatment is a must for most vegetables if you're concerned about quality of the finished product. Exceptions are onions and green peppers. Vegetables deteriorate rapidly during storage, more so than fruit because they are lower in acid, sugar, and vitamin C content. Therefore, the enzyme action occurs at a faster rate in vegetables, which results in changes in texture as well as losses in flavor and in color. Enzymes are easily destroyed by thoroughly heating the vegetables by blanching, either steam or boiling water. This sets the color, shortens the drying and rehydration time by relaxing the tissue walls so moisture can escape and then re-enter more rapidly. It kills most microorganisms and destroys enzymes, and it shortens final cooking time of rehydrated vegetables. So that's an important tip to pre-treat your vegetables. So let's talk about testing for dryness. You can tell fruits are dry when there is no wetness that can be squeezed from a piece when cut and when it is tough and pliable. Try squeezing the fruit. It should spring back without sticking. Berries should rattle when shaken. You need to watch closely towards the end of the drying time and test them frequently after cooling them to room temperature. On vegetables, they are considered dry if brittle or tough, or they may be considered crisp. Some shatter if you hit them with a hammer. Now let's talk about post-drying treatment for fruits. Once the fruit is dried, it must go through a process called conditioning, where the residual moisture in the fruit is evenly distributed. It decreases the chance of spoilage, especially mold. It's not required for vegetables because of the greater degree of moisture loss in the vegetables. So this is what you need to do. You cool the fruits, pour them into a food grade container, not more than 2/3 of the way full. Cover the container and place in a warm, dry place. Shake the container daily or stir the contents at least once a day for 10 to 14 days and check for signs of condensation or spoilage. Now, sun-dried fruits and vine-dried beans need treatment to kill insects and their eggs. This can be done by either the freezer or the oven method. The freezer method means that you seal the food in freezer-type plastic bags, place the bags in a freezer set at 0 degrees Fahrenheit or below, and then leave them at least 48 hours. The oven method means that you place the food in a single layer on a tray or in a shallow pan, place in an oven preheated to 160 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. So remember that this is for sun-dried fruits and vine-dried beans. This is to kill the insects and their eggs. So we want to do this after the drying process has taken place. So let's talk about storage. Package dried foods in small amounts because when opened and exposed to air, food can absorb moisture and deteriorate. So, for example, if you're drying foods to use maybe in soups or stews or something like that, package those in containers of what you might think you would use for that particular soup because we don't want to continually open those over and over again. You can use glass jars manufactured for freezing and canning, or recycle one-time jars only if they are clean and can be sealed tightly. So everybody looking for use of those mayonnaise jars, this would be an okay use for those, not for canning. You can use those for drying. Food grade plastic is acceptable and can be hot seal top, Ziploc, or twist closure. Food in bags can be stored inside metal containers with close-fitting lids to further protect the food. Now, storage temperature is very important. The warmer the temperature, the shorter the shelf life. For every 18 degrees drop in temperature, the shelf life increases 2 or 3 times for vegetables and 3 to 4 times for fruits. A range of 40 degrees to 60 degrees is acceptable. We want to avoid storing dried foods at temperatures over 70 degrees. Packaged dried foods can be kept in the freezer for an extended period of time. The color of fruit fades with exposure to light. Also, vitamins A and C are destroyed. Therefore, storage should be in a dark, dry, cool area. The shelf life will vary with the food and the storage conditions. Most dried foods can be stored for a year at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 months at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Vegetables have about half the shelf life of fruits. Fruit leathers have a 1-month shelf life unless they are frozen, which increases it to 1 year. Now, meat jerky has limited shelf life because of the fat remaining in the food and the possibility that it will become rancid. So let's talk about our resources that we have to share with you today. Every time we do a canning presentation, we always share the So Easy to Preserve book. This is not a free resource. This is one that has to be ordered from the University of Georgia, from that website there. The Wilson County Farmers Co-op does have these two on their shelf for sale. Another resource that we're sharing today is the How Do I Dry Foods resource from the National Center for Home Food Preservation. That is the home of our nationwide test kitchen for extension from the University of Georgia. So you click on that link and it will tell you how to dry all the foods that you're interested in drying. I also thought that the storing dried foods, even though we covered that today, that might be something you want to look at. And then I have some fact sheets, 3 different fact sheets here for you today. Drying fruits and vegetables. I have one with blanching times for fruits and vegetables. And then also, I found a really cool drying vegetables fact sheet with photos. So I wanted to share that for you today. So that's what we have for you on the drying foods. We want to encourage you to contact us if you have any questions at our email addresses listed there. And when we upload this video to YouTube, we will list the resources as well as our contact information underneath the video, and we'll share that on Facebook. So we hope you'll have a great day, and we'll see you next week.